start 3 lines from the top. The line begins with what yi-hyu nifsadim. So we are dealing with a very, very subtle principle. That the union of nifsadim in a created entity does not really mean, does not represented by the nifsadim of that entity per se. Because its nifsadim is representative of the Rotzen HaBeirei, that it should be a nifsadim. Why so? Why not just that the thing should last forever? The answer is that since it's a haver, since it's an existing, a tangible presence on a worldly level, it by definition is a nifsad. Therefore, it cannot be nitzchi by its own definition, by its own design. Because whole hebe is nifsad. In contrast, we have to try to delve into this. Is not easy at all. A neshamah is nitzchi. Is a neshamah a haver or it's not a haver? Is a presence or it's not a presence? The answer is it is not a presence. What does that mean? It's not a presence. It's presence. It gives life to the person. The answer is the whole lineage of the neshamah is to represent the Meibashn in the person. It is not representing its own presence, its own existence. This is the difference between a haver and not a haver. We have the very simple mishalim that allows us to delve into this a little bit, and I'd like to go back to this mishalim. We said, went back to this, what's what table? A table that is built and created and stands in your dining room is a hoiver. This hoiver, by definition of its presence, has to dissipate over time. But the element of a table in your thought, in the human value system, that cannot dissipate. Why not? Here is an important insight. Our concept of a table is not we project what we're going to do with the table. It does not come into the focus when we need a table to put a book down. A table is something which is a direct derivative of what a human being is, just like a home. A home is, you said, any order. A home, we don't need a home just because it's raining. A human being needs a home, needs a place in the world. We explained that in a very broad way. This is the definition of a human being. That he has a real place in the world. Because that's what he was created for, to affect the world. And if he hasn't that ability to affect the world, then any other. Similarly, on the small scale, a table is there in the human being not because it is there as a presence, as a haver, but by virtue of the truth of its of its definition, a human definition to it. From this truth of human definition, then you start to thinking, okay, how do you represent it and bring it down to a physical, practical level? Now that you have a dining room, okay, so what are you going to do about a table? But the dining room and the table, this is not one thing. This is something you put together. That's what hoiva. The hoiva element must be a nifsad by definition, because it does not have a primary presence. What is a primary presence? Our primary presence is that which is there because that's the truth. That's the way it has to be. It must be. A human being, by virtue, by the divine definition of what a human being is, he must have a home, or a place in the world and so forth. That's not a hoiva.
That's not a hoiva.
No, it's not a hoiva. A hoiva means that you recognize its presence because you see it, because it's tangible.
Oh.
Now we came to a real dilemma. The dilemma is that God created the world, and the world is definitely a hoiva. And yet, this hoiva also has an infinity quality. As the neshamah says, it brings down from the neshamah. The pasuk says, "Il tis hashamayim ba'oretz behiborom." So it says, "Behiborom," as they were created. It means that it says they are just as solid and as fresh throughout their existence. Behiborom, as in the day when they were created. Which means he is a hoiva, a created entity, which does not subscribe, does not have the qualities of a hoiva. He doesn't age over time. Behiborom. How do we understand this behiborom element? So here is where it is, as I said many times, we already discussed it. The world per se, by the design of what the world is, and everything in the world likewise, is a hoiva v'nifsad, is a hoiva. That's what the definition of world is. It is a hoiva, it's a presence. But this presence is something that the Creator wants. What he wants? It represents his rotzon, that there should be a world. This rotzon is not a hoiva. This rotzon is a divine reality.
So
one second. We are accustomed, we always separate between what I want and what I do. Here we have to delve a little bit deeper. This rotzon is not separate from what it wants. Like the Rebbe explained, the rotzon is a gilui ho'etzem, min ho'etzem, gilui min ho'etzem, shehu k'moi ho'etzem. The gilui is like the etzem, which means that this gilui, the rotzon wants that there should be a world. This gilui has an etzem quality. This gilui creates the whole world. The Rotzen Abeira, that there should be a world, this is what creates a world. So therefore the world therefore has a presence, even though it's an hoiva, but it has a means of being of presence, not on the basis of its hoiva, but on the basis of the Rotzen Habayir. To give our mashalim and so that have some kind of a view in the human being is extremely util to express Yonim Elikim, because a human being was created in that level. And this is going back to what we already discussed. The home, starts with the house, is a hoiva. And yet, as a home of a human being, it does not speak of dissipation. The home is going to be here forever. The house element, and that which is structured, that has to dissipate, because it's a heavy nifsad. But the home element, this is something which represents what the human being is. Where? In the world, in a practical, in a factual place. Not conceptually that he needs a home. In the factual present, in the final product of a home, this home carries with it a human power, staying power. Like we said many times, if the table breaks, we know it's going to be fixed, because the table is not dependent on the hoiva element. It is actually maintained by the Rotzen Habayir. Similar union is in the world. The world is a hoiva v'nifsad. For some reason, the Borei Ha'olam wanted to have a world that is hoiva v'nifsad, but it's his world. Therefore, this hoiva v'nifsad has a divine presence, which defies the dissipation. He is a temporary creature, creation. By definition, it's a temporary creation, and it's going to last forever. And it's going to last forever not because it gets recreated by the Creator. This is important to understand. But by its very presence as a temporary existence, it has an eternal presence. Because the Creator wants that there should be this type of creation. This rotzing is not a hoiva v'nifsad. This rotzing is a divine rotzing. And this is what the Rebbe says. I want to read inside so you could see this, the way the Rebbe says this.
Where are we?
Oh wait, we'll start, I said 2 lines from the top on page Kuf Lamed Aleph. 3 lines from that. The calls Zamat, as long, Sharotzin Bohem, that there is a rotzin in the creation of the world. Sheyir b'kiyumam, that they should persist in their existence. B'li hefseidus, without dissipation. Harehem kayomim, they are therefore kayom, persist in their existence. Kumei, and he is important to you. Kumei dover ha'nitzchi. They persist to be kumei dover ha'nitzchi. In other words, it is not something that needs to be recreated every time. Kumei dover ha'nitzchi, like something that is nitzchi inherently, that doesn't have the whole phenomenon of dissipation. Nitzchi. Even though they do have the phenomenon of dissipation, this is a phenomenal thing. This world, with all its limits and all its its worldly qualities, has an eternal quality, an inherent eternal quality. Because the world exists not because the world exists, but because there is a divine will that it should be. Let's take this a step further so we understand it a little bit better. What is there, maybe going a little bit beyond our purview, what is it in the world that the divine, the Rebbe should want the world? What is it in that world? There is a world. There's a hoive. There's a mitzvah unto itself. And in this world, you get up and do mitzvahs from Rebbe. This is what the Rebbe gets out of this world. Mitzvahs. You acknowledge the Rebbe's reality in a world that does not have a basis for it. It's a hoive of an nifsad. And you go and you set up your life on principles that are completely outside of the purview of this world in which you live. So you're revealing, you're identifying a godly presence in a worldly level. This is the Ratzon HaBeir. Yeah.
I have two questions. First, you said that it's not being recreated, it's komod on it. But what's about, it says in the Tanya that Kadosh B'Tivei, every second Hashem is creating the world.
So Machadish B'Tuv does not mean that the world dissipates into nothingness and then gets recreated. The Haraya, you say Machadish. Machadish means you bring novelty to something which already exists. Otherwise, not mechadish. So essentially, mechadish means this which we are saying, that he maintains this precarious existence of the world in a mechudesh manner. He gives it a presence of a divine quality. Mechadesh. When we see the sun rise in the morning, it's a chidush. It's a chidush because the sun, should have disappeared a long time ago. It's 5,000 years. But it's still there. This still there is mechadesh b'tuvei. This is the godly effect. It is not part and parcel of the sun itself. The sun itself should have burned out a long time ago. And yet, it is as fresh today as it was 5,000 years ago when it first created. This is the Chidush. So he presents to us a fresh world. Which world? The same world, that Mechadish, the one that he already saw yesterday.
But it's much more from the Tanakh. It needs to be like an
Boaz?
effort. If I remember correctly, from the Tanakh, it needs to be like an effort, like it brings the motion of this Yamsef. Yesh Ma'ayin has to be in a constant basis. This Yesh Ma'ayin.
is Rotzer Rashab.
Here's what that means. Let me explain to you. We say the world is a haver. The rotzen that gives presence to the world, is that a haver or not a haver?
Not all.
That's ayin. The whole union that the world, the fact that there is such an union that the world has a nitzchius element is because it represents the ayin from which it is created. The chayz that gives it. This is the mechadish b'tuvah. This is the ayin. This is the chidush of the rotzen.
But this happens every second.
Every second, sure, because it has no presence of its own.
It sounds like it's an active state of the yeshmah.
What is the active element in it? I continue to want it.
Continue to what? To want it.
I continue to want that, but we learned that once I want it, it's for Nitzchi. Now he's saying that.
No,
I
wait a
have
second,
to-
wait a second. No, let me finish it. Wanting, the rotzen, is by definition a dover nitzchi, because it represents the nefesh itself. But this is what we're learning. This is the great difficulty over here. It is a dover nifsad, but yet it's kaim k'mei dover hanitzchi. How can dover nifsad be kaim k'mei dover hanitzchi? So I said, the best way I can have for us to relate to it is the table is something which is true to the human being. When you come into somebody's home and say, "Oh, what's this table doing over here?" You have no problem. The table presents the human beings wanting to be at a table. But the table is a novel thing. It has to be created. But it represents the human spirit, that the human being has to have a table. So the table does not, let me say this, when you see a table, this table, you do not think which carpenter built it. You say, which human being conceptualized it? Even though it was a built table. This is the union where you have, so to speak, in one instant, in one point, nifsad and nitzchi. Nifsad mitzad its structure, mitzad its built, it's a hoiver, and nitzchi mitzad the rotzen that this hoiver should be. True, this is one of the most very, very difficult to conceptualize, but the Rebbe, this is why, and that's why they extended to a further level. The Rebbe should want that there should be a hoiver benifsad of our world, and that should, and this is where he should be recognized as a creator, as a Rebbe. In this temporary, in this precarious existence, we should recognize that there is a divine presence. Please understand, we spoke yesterday. To stand up in this shaky, precarious world, say, Rebbeinu Shalom, help me. It makes any sense, but it doesn't make any sense. Why should Rebbe get involved in your daily affairs? But this is what happens. We recognize the Rebbe's presence all the time, and we say, help me in this, help me in this. My foot hurts me, can you help me get over it? This is the Rotzen HaBeile in the creation of the world. There should be a Hoiba v'nifsad, and that should represent a Dover Nitzchi. K'moi Dover HaNitzchi. These words, K'moi Dover HaNitzchi, is a very important influence. It's not Dover Nitzchi, it's K'moi Dover HaNitzchi. It remains a precarious existence. And yet, it does not speak as a Dover HaNifsad.
So, in Metzias, the sun is not, because I remember from the Rambam that all the Daled Yesodus are continuously ceasing to dissipate. And the sun does not have that? Because the way he's saying it here is that the sun, the person, Dafki the Tinik, Mishon Shanoila Maskilis Yab. But
So that's what we said, that there are two levels of creations. There is the Kayom B'min and Kayom B'ish. The sun is among those that Kayom B'ish. It's a phenomenal thing. B'ish means that each, the original entity that was created, not just the kind of creation, but the actual entity that was created. The sun is not one of a kind. It is that sun that was created in 6 days in the fourth day of creation. So this Kayom B'ish, just like Kayom B'min is due to the presence of the divine will, Kayom B'ish is for sure due to the presence of the divine will. In other words, the sun persists, but it doesn't make any sense from its own different design, from its own definition, that it persists to be. Doesn't make any sense.
my question is more on a technical basis. From what I remember in the Rambam, it says that all the four...
No, 4 elements. This is not... This is... Eternality say this. This is the ingredients from which things are made. And they are constantly dissipating into each other and going into a cycle. That's a different element.
But then there's parts of the sun that's dissipating.
Thank you.
He gives the mashal there of the ocean, the water near the...
Okay. However, here's a good example. Yeah, the water of the ocean dissipates into the air, and then the air it turns around and becomes water again, whatever it is. But the ocean will never dissipate. Why? Because the ocean is a real creation.
It's Bamin or Be'ish?
Ish?
The,
Sets it gets, it becomes water. Becomes
The question is, could there be ish?
every Be'ish has a mean undertone. This requires a broader discussion. What is our limit? What's
9 o'clock.
Well, 9 o'clock? Very briefly, I just want to make a point. I think I already made the point once before. The way the world perceives things
By world you mean goyim, or by nature itself?
by nature itself. This is the worldly view. The way the worldly view allows you to see things. And goyim, they represent that view. And we, if we subscribe to a worldly view, we'll see it all the same way. how is a city built? A city. A city is built when one person comes and establishes a tent. Somebody else sees, oh, somebody lives here. Okay, I'll move next to you. Pretty soon it becomes a neighborhood. And the next thing you know, this neighborhood assumed a certain design, and it becomes a city, and it becomes a whole community. So from this perspective, it is the initial tent that this is the city. But let's think a little bit broader and a little bit deeper. When this person established this tent over there, did he intend to stay alone in this desert? He was beginning a city because he projected a city. The city builds the individual homes, not the homes build the city.
Some people do.
Okay, Shmuel, I know you.
They want to get away from the city.
Okay.
It doesn't work out.
This is important to understand. There's the greater reality. This is what that which is not the hoiva v'nifsad. This is what creates things, even though you don't have an identity to it. But this is the spirit behind everything.
So casinos are an expression of divine will.
Not considered drunks. All right. This was an important thing I was holding back. This is important to understand. That which is undefined, that which is a fundamental reality, that is the spirit and the power behind everything that happens on the defined level.
So the point relating back to Ish and Min was that,
yes,
that the main thing is the
what?
The issue of Ish and Min is that even though that there might be components which are make it seem Min, that
I tell you, I don't want to go there anymore. If you feel that will help you, you go. I just want to understand this principle. This term in the third line from the top on Kuf Lamed Aleph. Calls man shehorotz b'hem shel b'kiyum b'li hefsedus. As long as there's a rotzin in them that they should be persistent, b'li hefsedus, without dissipation. What kind of entity is it? Since on their own they're going to be dissipating. Is this a recreated entity, or is the same entity that has a persistent existence?
Same entity.
The answer is, it is kayoming p'neidover hanitzchi. This is important thing. This is a phenomenal statement. Because intentionally they have said them.
One more question. Was said before that what's the neshamah? The neshamah is to bring in Hashem, to represent Hashem in the human being. That was said on the neshamah before. Just before was said that what's the neshamah? It's not a hoiva, because its whole thing is to represent the Abishter in the human being.
Go ahead, I know which
So
you focus.
what's the difference between this and we're saying that the wall represents the Rotzen Hashem? So what's the difference between the Neshama, which represent the Abishter in human being, than the Rotzen, than the wall represent the Rotzen?
There is not. The neshama for us is like a moshel for the overall rots.
Because the neshama we said is not a hoiva v'nifsad.
That's right.
And the one we're saying it is.
No. The neshama is in the group. The group is a hoiva v'nifsad. Okay, next stage. Fourth line. This whole discussion was in order to explain a principle which is now summarized. Hare, thus we see, she'efshor, that it's possible, liyos, that there should be, she'ein le'soiv, something that ein le'soiv, that has no end, which means like something that persists indefinitely. K'moi dover hanitzchi, like we said, as if it were nitzchi in its own reality. When you don't see its nifsa, then you bring it back into existence. It is Budover Nitzchi. Although that in fact it has a beginning. This is a phenomenal iman. It has a beginning. That means it is not a Dover HaNitzchi. It is not a fundamental presence. It's a heva. If it's a heva, then it should dissipate. And yet we see that that's a thing. The efshali that is possible to be ein le'soif, but she'ein le'tchil. Now we have to reflect on this. Rebbe, what are you telling me? This that you're saying, is that a worldly phenomenon? This is not a worldly phenomenon. The Rebbe can do anything he wants. He says something, discover American Mizoctus. So the emphasis over here is, yes, of course, it's a divine presence. So the important thing is, yes, it is the divine presence, but the divine presence gives it a presence, defying, so to speak, the principles that are involved in this existence. Because it presents itself as a dober she'ei lo tchila. As a dober nitzchi. So the Rebbe, what's the big? Yeah, the Rebbe can do anything you want. So the big thing that the Rebbe is trying to point out, yeah, the Rebbe can do anything you want, but he does it in a manner that defies the concept that this is something which is being renovated, rejuvenated. It is midover hanitzchi. Because the Rotzen Eliki is Mizgala in it. The Rotzen Eliki is a Dover Nitzchi. So the Rotzen Eliki is a Dover Nitzchi, can be Mizgala in something that is of a Hebe B'nifsad. This is exactly what the Rebbe is saying. One second. And if the Rotzen Eliki is Mizgala in Dover HaNifsad, then that thing conceals completely its Hefsedus element and becomes from Dover HaNitzchi. Because, well, let's finish this thought. Because then this thing represents not its Hefsedus, not its Heve element, but its truth element. It's element that's Eliki element. What is a human being? There are animals and there's a human being. Animals, what is their existence? What do they consist in? Eating and sleeping and hunting. Their whole activity, the whole presence is of a worldly level. What is a human being? A human being lives in his intellect. What the intellect have to do with the food that he has to eat? or the ground on which he stands, or the house that he had their needs. He lives in his intellect. Even more than the intellect, he lives in the emunah. The Rambam says, the human being flies off of a tangent. He looks in for a motzer rishon, non-worldly definition. Where are you going? That's what a human being is. This phenomenal creature, this human being, is contained where? In this little body. This is where we get confused. Hey, this is all he is. He's body. It's not body.